So I'm going to be speaking about turbulent times and how turbulent times call for dynamism. I think one of the things you would recognize is that COVID-19 has created a very turbulent time, and it calls for dynamism. But my focus is going to be on political risk management, how you manage turbulence by managing the political risks that firms do face. And if you look at business environments, you've got an economic environment, which is more around economic growth, inflation, interest rates, FX rates, more around markets, more around money, financials. You've got a social environment, which seems to focus more on things like culture, like population, like demographics. How many people in the country? What is the culture? What is the language? You've got technological environment, more around innovation, cybersecurity. You've also got political and legal environments where the focus is on regulation and policy. All of these things affect firms. The economy of a country has implications for performance. The social environment, the population, the language, the culture, it's got implications for the market segment. It's got implications for market size. It's got implications for the kind of products that you can sell. You talk about technology, and of course, innovation is very important. It can push certain businesses out. We've got new products and new services causing some companies to fail or to collapse. So businesses have to pay attention to what is happening in their technological environments. Then, of course, you've got regulation and policy. Most businesses are affected by regulation and policy. In fact, a business is created within the law, is created within policy. So you find that the external environment has got implications for businesses. But of all of these environments, one of them stands out for me, the political and the legal environment. That plays a very, very crucial role. It has a very overarching influence on firms. Every business activity you see happens within state boundaries. Businesses operate within countries. And every country has got a government, and that government has got the sovereign power to determine what is in the best interest of the country. So they make the laws, they make the policies that govern society, that regulate what businesses can do and cannot do. So you see, political issues have got a very cascading and strong influence on all of the other environments. You can talk about the economic environment, you can talk about the technological environment, you can talk about the social environment, but what you realize is that the political environment influences what happens in all of these other environments. The economy is affected by politics. Population is affected by politics. Culture is affected by politics. Technology is affected by politics. But that is because politicians determine the rules of the game in any country you find in the world. Taxes, these are set by governments. Interest rates, very much influenced by public policy, government policy. Minimum wages, these are things that are determined by politicians. You can talk about population control, health, education, innovation funding, IP protection, intellectual property protection, cybersecurity. These are all things that are influenced by politics. The politicians are the ones that play a very big role in determining these issues. And these issues have got strong impact on firms. Businesses are affected by taxes, they're affected by interest rates, by wages. Most of the businesses that are in tech, very much need intellectual property protection. And that, of course, can be offered through regulation, through policy. And who makes these policies? The government. The political environment plays a very, very important role, which makes it very crucial for any firm to really show some interest in it, but also try as much as possible to understand what is happening and how those things happening can affect their performance. The political environment is very dynamic. It keeps changing. It's like a storm. Things that happened last year are not the things that are happening this year. Policies keep changing. Governments keep changing. Things can change within a twinkle of an eye. A change in government could mean that we've got new policies that, old policies are reversed or replaced, and new ones are put in place. Sometimes you've got policy changes being advocated by non-governmental bodies, like the NGOs, like the charities, like even society, communities, people protesting against certain policies. And these things influence politicians to take action. I guess most of you have heard of Brexit, the UK leaving the European Union. Now, Brexit is a political issue. This was something that, emerged from a particular political party, turned into a national referendum. People voted for this to happen. But it's got implications for businesses. There are numbers of industries that, are likely to feel the impact of Brexit. You look at agriculture. You look at what the UK produces in the agricultural industry. 2/3 of it is exported to the EU. So the EU is the largest market for UK's agricultural produce. You're going to have tariffs and trade restrictions put in place. That has implications for businesses in agriculture. UK farmers, they get a lot of subsidy from the EU. You've got the automobile industry, the car manufacturers. These firms are also going to be affected. Financial industry, education, healthcare. There are all kinds of implications. Now, it's not just firms within the UK, but also EU firms are going to be affected by Brexit. And what we've seen over the past few years is a lot of businesses trying to relocate their operations out of the UK, simply because of some of the constraints that Brexit is going to cause for them. So you've got businesses relocating out of UK to other European countries. But this is a political issue. It's got ramifications for businesses. So one of the things we see with dynamics in the political environment is that it creates what we call political risk. The probability that some adverse effects are going to affect businesses as a result of political events or changes in a country. And if you look at the cycle of political risk, those changes will always create what we call chaos, confusion. Confusion leads to uncertainty. What existed yesterday doesn't exist today. That makes long-term planning very difficult. It's difficult to plan when things are constantly evolving, when things are constantly changing. It becomes very difficult to plan. And when you cannot plan for the long term, obviously, your strategy won't be as good. And if your strategy isn't very good, you're sure going to suffer some poor performance. Some firms can bounce back from poor performance, but if it becomes something very chronic, you will end up with business failure. And this is where no firm wants to be. If you look beyond national boundaries and think about political risks in international businesses, you've got, governments confiscating foreign companies. Sometimes, providing compensation, other times not. You've got, governments imposing all kinds of policies and rules and regulations that constrain foreign business operations. There are times when businesses are not allowed to even transfer their earnings out of certain countries, or restrictions on foreign exchange and the likes. So you've got political risks affecting domestic businesses as well as international businesses. And it's very important for these risks to be managed. Now, the key question is, how do you manage political risks? Some businesses use insurance. They buy cover. They buy insurance to protect themselves against adverse political events. Others try as much as possible to contribute to the economy by employing local people. And this mostly happens with international firms. When a foreign firm goes into another country, it tries to employ a lot of local people so that it will be seen favorably by the government. Others would buy locally from domestic suppliers. Some firms will do CSR, civic duty. One of the things you realize is that these tactics do not engage politicians. You buy insurance to protect yourself. You contribute to the economy with the hope that politicians will like you, or you do civic duty with the hope that governments are going to treat you very nicely. But you do not actually engage with the politicians, right? So they are good at managing political risk, but one element is missing. There isn't that active engagement with the politicians. That leads me to talk about what I call proactive political risk management, which entails a very interesting term called corporate political activity. Corporate political activity basically refers to the attempts that companies make to influence government policy in ways that are favorable to them. You might have heard of it, simply called lobbying, when companies lobby. And they do it for various reasons. To manage uncertainty, as I mentioned, political risk creates uncertainty. To manage it, they do corporate political activity. To reduce regulatory burden, maybe there are so many rules that the government is trying to impose on a particular industry. What firms sometimes try to do is to reduce the number of regulations that they face, to make those regulations much more simpler or relaxed. Other times is to create opportunities for themselves, getting government policy to create opportunities, but also mitigate some of the threats that they face. So firms do CPA, they do corporate political activity for diverse reasons. Now, how do firms do CPA? How do they try to influence government policy? There are so many strategies, contributing money to politicians, to political parties, using information, lobbying, conducting research, threatening governments, making promises. Some do constitutional, things around press conferences and public, relations. Others, managers just develop personal connections to the politicians or employ former politicians or employ their relatives. Some firms do CSR. They contribute to society in the view that politicians are going to see them favorably. So there are so many things that firms do to be able to influence government policy. There's so many strategies ranging from financial to social contribution. And the thing about CPA is that it leads to some interesting outcomes. Firms are able to reduce risk. They are bailed out by governments if they encounter problems. They are able to participate in foreign trade missions. So if governments want to strike trade deals with other governments, some firms that contribute a lot to politics or the politicians are allowed to be part of those missions. They pay lower taxes, which leads to high performance. Some of them pay low interest rates on bank loans. They've got easier access to loans. They win government contracts. There's so many things to it. But what you also realize is that firms that do a lot of CPA find themselves involved in fraud. And the problem is that they evade it because they do fraud, but they're less likely going to be caught. And my research shows that a lot of them are involved in poor corporate governance, particularly in developing countries, right? So there's some good sides to, corporate political activity, but there are also some negative sides, which leads to a very interesting question. Is it ethical? Is it good? Is it in the public interest? These are core questions that we're currently addressing when we talk about corporate political activity. Is it something ethical? Obviously, it may lead to some good outcomes, but it also has some negative implications where you've got, firms having so much control over governments and using the governments to achieve their own interests to the detriment of the public, to the detriment of society. There is a need for a paradigm shift. I think at the moment, a lot of people are very much concerned about the negative aspects of active political risk management, where firms do a lot of CPA, because most people feel that it's very harmful, particularly in countries where it is not regulated. You have what we call political capture, where managers and firms are the ones that really govern a country rather than the politicians. The politicians are accountable to organizations rather than to the people, right? So people think it's harmful, and we need a shift from harmful CPA to CPA that is very ethical, CPA that protects, that has the interests of the society at hand. It's possible for firms to pursue their interests, but at the same time also pursue the interests of society. What I want to say is that firms do corporate political activity to manage political risk. Political risk is very crucial, it's important, there's a need to manage it. And firms do CPA to manage it. But CPA itself could negatively impact politics, governance, and society. Hence, there is that important need for managers to find the balancing spot where they're able to ensure or protect the interests of the firms and at the same time the interests of society, or protecting the interests of the firm but not harming society or public governance. This balancing spot is very crucial in the management of political risk. Otherwise, you'll be trying to manage a problem, but in the process, create another problem, which is something that we don't encourage managers to do.